Good morning, everyone. I hope everyone's been enjoying the evolution topic. I just wanted to do a little mini lesson based on the index cards. So we'll go through these, talk about them a little bit. So first card here is species, and a species is a group of similar organisms that can breed and produce fertile offspring. So we know that even looking at we have polar bears, we have grizzly bears, we have brown bears, grizzly bears. We have black bears. There's Asian bears. There's all kinds of different bears in that bear family. Um, so that's how we get the different species. And the important part here is produce fertile offspring. So a popular example is if you take a tiger and a lion. We know if those two have babies, it's called a liger. Now we know that a tiger and a lion are two different species, but they are able to reproduce and produce an offspring, but that offspring is not fertile, which that means it cannot have more ligers. So a liger, when it grows up, can't go, the boy liger and girl liger can't get together and have baby ligers. They're infertile. Whereas when you have the polar bear, when mommy polar bear, daddy polar bear, they have baby polar bears. These baby polar bears grow up and they have more polar bears. So that's how that one works. So that's species. So we go on to our next word. We have fossil. So a fossil, that's something we find in the rocks from something that lived previously. Usually it takes a long time for this fossils to form. But this allows us, and that's some evidence of evolution, this allows us to see um, what lived before us. How much would we know about dinosaurs if there were not fossils of dinosaurs? So it allows scientists to learn a lot about previously living things. So we move on to our next one. Now here's one of the favorite things for evolution: birds and bird beaks. Now everyone did a great job in their bird beak lab in producing different things. So if we look here, the important part is, for the most part, we got sort of the same bird, and they like to use the finches from the Galapagos Islands, which Darwin researched. And if we look here, they all have a different beak, and that different beak allows them all to eat a different food. Now, why this is important is because all six of these birds can live on the same island, but they're not going to fight each other for food. That's where evolution really kicks in, is when things are fighting. So if two things are fighting for the same food, if whoever gets the food lives, and if you don't get the food, over say a couple months, you're not going to live. That animal dies. It doesn't reproduce. It's not strong. But the other animal that was able to get the food does survive. It has more of those kind, more of its own kind, and that species keeps going. So that's where the important thing is. Animals don't want to really fight for food because that obviously is more work. And if you lose, there's a good chance you lose your life. So that's where evolution really kicks in. So over time, all these birds develop different beaks so they could live in the same island and eat different foods and not have to fight for food. It makes their lives a lot easier. So that's how adaptations work. So evolution. So this is what we're talking about. If you watch the Mankind Rising video, they sort of talked right from the very beginning all the way to up here to Homo sapiens, us. So we can, they talked about how we went from in the trees, our ancestors were ape-like, and then over time they started standing upright and walking on two legs. Bipedalism is what it's called. So that's what or evolution is, a change in time. Now this is something that takes thousands and millions of years to happen. Um, so that's evolution, and that's sort of what all these words will tie back to. So a theory. We did some reading about theories. So that is a well-tested concept. So the reason evolution is a theory is because we can't sit here, and if we go back to this example, watch this ape turn into a human, because that takes millions of years and no one lives that long to observe it, and we don't have any way to see that. We go by fossils. So that's why it's a theory. It's because you can't have definitive proof. We have good examples, but not definitive proof of it happening. Now, the other sort of idea in science are laws, and laws usually have mathematical formulas with them, and that's stuff that you can, put numbers in a formula and you get the exact answer. So that's sort of the difference between a law and a theory. So our next word here, natural selection. So we're individuals that are better suited to survive and reproduce. So this is what we mean by competition. Now you can compete for food, or you can compete to just survive. So in this example, they're showing how we got green bugs and orange bugs. Oh, look at the birds love the green beetles. So what's going to happen to these green beetles over time? They're going to die, or they're going to get smaller numbers because they're being eaten, and they're not eating the orange ones. Maybe it's because the orange ones are mimicking something that's poisonous. A lot of times the bright colors are poison, so they're not going to eat them. So over time, at one point, a green beetle made an orange beetle, and that orange beetle is doing better. So now that orange beetle can have more orange beetles when it gets older, and this will eventually turn to all orange beetles and no green beetles. So that's sort of how that works. Competition. You compete for food, but you also compete not to be food. So that's how those two things work. So our next one here, natural selection, and this is sort of what we read about too, with artificial selection, is what we do. So over time, there's different ideas on how it happened, but wolves became to be like our friends. Some people think it's because we had food. The wolves wanted food, so we slowly used the food to make the wolves nice and became our pets. But humans over time have done it where they've breeded the wolves to what they want. Some people might want a collie. You got a bulldog, you got a dachshund. They're all different. They all come from wolves, but it was because of humans that we have all these different breeds, not because of nature. So our next word, variation. So variation is just differences. We can see how here in all these giraffes, they're different color, different spots. We see in humans, we have different hair color, different heights, different eye color, different skin color. All those differences are just variation within a species. That's variation. Next word here, homologous structures. So if we look here, we have a human, cat, whale, and bat. Now you want to think about it, but if we look here, homologous structures means it's very similar. 5 fingers, 5 fingers, 5 fingers, 5. We got fingers, we got wrists, we got 2 of our arm bones, which we call right here. Then we got our upper arm bone. So even though these are all different mammals, at one point they had a similar ancestor because something gave us all these same setups for our arms. So that's what it means by homologous structures. When we see the same setup of, say, bone structure in different species. So our next word, gradualism. That just means evolution takes a very long time to happen. It just occurs slowly, but it steadily just keeps going. It's like the tortoise. It's, slow and steady gets you there. So here we have punctualism, punctuated equilibrium. That happens fast. So that's your hair. So sometimes something happens to make this happen. A perfect example using these butterflies, these moths, was actually in England during the Industrial Revolution. You had black moths and white moths. Now the white moths actually did a little bit better because they would say live on a white birch tree, and they had better camouflage, where the black ones would get eaten by birds because they didn't blend in as well. But because of the Industrial Revolution, you had a lot more smoke and pollution, and we know that soot, that pollution lands on the trees and turns them black. So now all of a sudden, the black moths, when they were on the tree, they blended in, the white ones didn't, so then the white ones disappeared. So that's something that naturally sort of happened, but it happened fast because, it was only a matter of, say, a decade or so because of all the pollution that happened in England. So our next word here. So we talked about Charles Darwin. You read a lot about him. He's sort of the father of evolution. He wrote The Origin of Species, and he's sort of one that sort of got all the ideas going and how it worked. Okay, so overproduction. So that's when an organism makes more than will actually survive. So if we think about it, humans typically have one baby. Sometimes you have twins, triplets, but typically you have one. That's because humans can take care of it, so they know that they're there to take care of it. Now, if we think about, say, fish lay their eggs, and there's many species of fish that don't take care of them. So they lay thousands of eggs. And the whole idea is they don't know, but that most of the eggs will be eaten by predators. So that, if they have thousands of them, and say, even though if 10% live, you're still going to get 100. So that's the idea. If you make more babies on the idea that a lot of them are going to die, but if you have a lot, some will live and some will keep, survive to make more babies when they grow up. So fossil record, we talked about that. So, we can find fossils that go back all the way through the different points in time. And that's used for evolution, evidence of evolution. Common ancestor. So this means as we go back in time, there's a common ancestor. So, if we look here, the chimpanzee and the bear, totally different. But millions and millions of years ago, there was something here that is sort of the common ancestor. It's related to both the chimpanzee and the bear. And as you go back and farther back in time, you get two more different things. But at some point, millions of years ago, there was something that was the ancestor related to both of these. So embryology. So that sort of looks at same idea as homologous structure. So these are all embryos. So when the baby is very, very young, remember when we did reproduction, at one point, this is what we looked like here. But if you look, here you have a fish, a reptile, a lizard, a bird, and a human. And they all look pretty close to the same. They have gill slits. We had a tail, okay? So they all look very similar. So that means that, this is something that it works and shows that we are related to, at some point in time, millions and millions of years ago, to birds, fish, and reptiles. So homologous structures, this is another one. So this is a whale. This right here, vestigial structures, this right here shows it's like their hip bone. This is their leg. At one point, these whales had legs. This is their hip bone. Same thing with us. We have tailbones. That means at one point in time, millions of years ago, we had a tail. It's shrunk and it's up to the point where it's just a little bone, but it's still a tailbone. So that's what vestigial structures are. It's things that we might have. We don't use it anymore, but it shows that we had it at some point. So DNA, we talked about that. Genetics, and that can always, we all have A, T, G, and C. So that sort of goes back and just shows that we still are related. Reproductive isolation. So if two things are separated, they will evolve differently. Good example is Madagascar. Madagascar used to be part of Africa. Over time, because of plate tectonics, Madagascar split apart. It's its own island. Now it has totally different animals than Africa. There are no lions on Madagascar, but we do have lemurs. Lemurs are only found in Madagascar, and that's just because it broke apart and it did its own thing separate from Africa. That's isolation. And our last one is just evidence of evolution. These are other things we just talked about that help us with the theory of evolution. So if you have any questions, let me know. And good luck with the Mankind Rising paragraph. Talk to you guys later. Bye.